Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this special edition of the Valley View, where we're interviewing city council candidates. And for this show, we have Christopher Proudfoot, who's running for Ward 8. I've been doing a few of these, so I get confused sometimes as to
Ward
which
8.
Ward 8. And what area is that?
So that is West Salem. The ward is completely encompassed in West Salem. It covers most of the hilly parts, not specifically the flat area, which is Ward 1, in sort of large sections of Wallace Road or Edgewater, but actually everything that's up in the hill is
Okay.
Ward 8.
So that house that I almost bought over there next to the Christmas tree farm, you then would have been represented.
If it's within city
yeah,
city
it
lines.
was out there. So this must be kind of an interesting campaign for you. Is this your first campaign?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And one of the things that I've been talking to various candidates about is Third Bridge, and supposedly it's to relieve traffic congestion in West Salem. So what is your take on the Third Bridge?
Well, the Third Bridge is actually a highly discussed issue in this campaign. Original project of the bridge covered a pretty large project that was going to, sort of just pave a giant valley into the bridge and move across, and I did not support that. I do support the more toned down version, and I think we can do a little bit better. So not to say I'm completely 100% support of the project as it is right now, but I do support where it's going, which is a more toned down, more realistic approach, something that the least environmental impact and least impact to residents and people within the West Salem portion. But I do think that we do need a bridge. As a resident of West Salem, I have vivid memories of being trapped down here in Salem, not able to get home during a couple of years ago when they had to close the bridge because of a police incident. Occasionally you have accidents on the bridge, and it makes it very difficult to get home. And during the ice storm, they shut down the bridge a couple of times to clear out some of the ice and snow that was on the bridge. Those are real problems that we face, and in the event of an emergency or a natural disaster or something where the bridges may not be able to sustain themselves, or an accident that just happens to be terribly bad and they've closed down the bridge, those of us that live in West Salem don't have another option to get home without driving all the way down to Independence or other parts of the taking long out of the way routes that often fill up themselves because many other people have the same idea. But I don't support a super giant project. I think that this idea of this $1 billion bridge is a terrible idea for Salem. But I do think that we do need to come up with a solution that's more manageable, realistic, and something that the residents of Salem can agree on. More importantly, I think between myself and my opponent has made a statement of how he wants to take the wind out of the sails of the No Third Bridge people, and I have no intention of doing that. They have a relevant part of the conversation that they really do want to see expressed and understood, and I support that. I think everyone should have an opportunity to sit at the table, share their viewpoints, and we can come to a solution that we can all agree on. I have no ideas or anything to just disregard what the people or the people the residents of Salem that have concerns about the bridge. I don't want to disregard them. I don't want to minimize their thoughts on it. I do want to hear what they have to say, and I think they should be invited to the table and brought through the process so we can come up with something we can agree on.
Well, one of the things though is that like the current bridges are going to need to be retrofitted.
They do.
And because if one of those fails because of, say, during an earthquake, you've got that bridge down, you've got it down, and you have nobody getting across.
I agree, and even to do the retrofitting, it's going to cause them to have to shut down a bridge for a period of time to be able to make those corrections that need to be made to make sure that it's safe for earthquakes and other circumstances. I remember several years ago, a barge, and this was in 2000 or 99, a barge hit the bridge, and there was a big concern about the structural impact of the bridge. And every time a piece of driftwood dumps up against it, we have this little moment. I think that we do need to be addressing that. We do need to be looking at that, and I think it highlights more than anything else the need to have an additional option available just in case we have to take one of those bridges, stop it for a period of time so that we can make retrofits, that we can make repairs that need to be made, and that it's not completely blocking everyone in West Salem from getting home. And that's what I'm really concerned about. And when you're at home and you can't get to the grocery store, or can't get to we have grocery stores, but you can't get to the movie theater or something like that. That's not the end of the world. We can be inconvenienced for a period of time, but when you're in Salem and you can't get home, that's a real big concern. That's something that I've faced myself, where there's animals that need to be taken care of. You have a sick family member, you have something that you need to be doing at home that is really important, and you can't get across the bridge.
Yeah, but basically the traffic problem is centered during rush hours at like 8 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. And it seems to me that they could at least be offering some shuttle bus service from one side to the other, because there are a lot of residents in West Salem and maybe on the Salem side that need to cross, but they don't need to be in a car necessarily. And if we had better public transportation in that regard, that would relieve some of that problem. And I guess the thing that bothers me about where they're talking about putting the third bridge is I think it's going to dump an awful lot of traffic into West Salem and make the traffic situation probably worse in the short term.
I don't necessarily. I mean, West Salem doesn't have a lot of businesses that people are traveling over there to go, I want to go shopping at Ross or Safeway, when there are some here in town. It's more the residents that are using that as a means of a critical means of getting across and to and from.
Well, I guess
Salem.
what I was looking at too, see, because they're talking about building it up further north, is that, say, big trucks coming from like Portland area or north of us would then go through West Salem through city streets to get out to the coast and other places. They wouldn't be coming through Salem. They'd be taking that and then ending up on downtown streets.
I mean, I think they're already doing that.
Well, no, because now they go straight across the bridge. They come through Salem, go across the bridge, and they don't go into West Salem unless they're actually delivering things into West Salem. But what I'm saying is, like, say you have some of these big trucks coming from the coast going up to Portland, or trucks coming from Portland going out to the coast, those are going to be dumped onto West Salem city streets.
It would still make sense to go through Salem Parkway, because you would have to get off Highway 22 way back by Capitol Manor and then drive all the way through West Salem, which would honestly probably take more time.
Well, yeah, but that's what I see as a potential issue if they do build it where they're talking about.
I mean, if you were moving product through, if you were in the trucking industry, it would still make appropriate sense to take the bridge the way it is right now. I think mostly what you would see is residents using the additional bridge. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that they would come in and try to cut across, but there's not really a reasonable way to do that without traveling down residential streets and having to sit through lots of lights. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to travel that way. It would still make the most logical sense to take the bridge onto Salem Parkway and up into I-5. For residents, it would be great because that's closer to our home and the destination that we're going.
Yeah.
For trucks, especially coming from from the coast or going to the coast, it just wouldn't make a lot of sense given the layout of the streets to do that and have it be a real viable option for them.
Yeah, and they're estimating the cost at $400 million.
I think that's a pretty extensive. I think we can do some trimming on that. That's a large cost for a bridge. Many other bridges around this country have been built for and I hate to say built for less, but built more efficiently to where they don't have such a tremendous cost.
So the other big infrastructure issue in Salem is the police department relocating it and also retrofitting the Civic Center, because that is not either. Neither of those are earthquake-proof, and now you've got your first responders in a building that could collapse.
That's the terrifying part about it.
And so, how do you view that issue about relocating the police department, and if so, where?
Well, as I said in the Statesman Journal interview that was done recently with the candidates, I do think that we need to find a better solution for the police department. I don't necessarily think that it needs to remain exactly in downtown Salem. I think there are some options where we should have a presence in some sort of, people expect to find the police department in a downtown core of a city, so we should have something there to accommodate that, a small reduced facility. but the police department itself maybe doesn't necessarily have to stay in downtown Salem. I know that there's been some other people discussing different options for that, and we should be exploring that. We should be looking at those options. The current situation being in a seismically unstable part of a building is not good. It's not good at all. The first responders shouldn't be the first ones to need help.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
The first ones providing that help. So we need to hold up our end and make sure that they have everything they need to be effective in those certain circumstances. Yeah. I think that if I can just continue on a little bit, there's been a lot of conversation about some sort of like underground parking structure and building this sort of massive project. And I don't think that's what Salem needs, and I don't necessarily think that's what the police need in their present location. I think if we are able to find another location around town where it maybe even is more accessible to those residents that need the police most, then that's fantastic, and we should look into that options. I still do think that we need a presence in downtown, a policing facility of some sort in downtown Salem, because that's where people go and they expect to find the police station there. And it's been that way for years, and we should still provide that. But I think the large majority of the policing facility and all of their resources and everything could be located in a place where it's cheaper and doesn't require extensive underground parking. That we can do that and be good stewards of the resources that the city residents have given us.
Yeah, and it should be fairly close to the yard where they do the maintenance on the cars as well, which is slightly east of downtown on Mission.
I think there's a couple people that have presented some really good proposals. I don't think we're there to set that yet.
Right.
That's where we should be having lots of conversations. Community residents, those that use the police station. Where do the police really need to be effective and be a visual presence? What are the other things that we're not reeling? What are the environmental concerns? What are the neighborhood concerns? What are the residents that are there? How is that going to impact traffic? How is that going to impact? I mean, there's lots of conversation that needs to go on, so I don't think we're like setting where it should be. But
we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, we need to be starting that in the near future because, like I said, the first responders can't be the first ones needing to be rescued.
Well, one of the other issues that I see is the downtown parking situation. And I see that as an example of the city council not getting sufficient information from the public, from the neighborhoods, to determine what the best solution is. They decided they wanted to put more parking meters in. They met a lot of resistance. The business people downtown decided that they wanted to keep their free parking and went out and got a bunch of signatures, at which point, to me, the city council panicked and implemented the initiative without thinking about some of the consequences. And I see those consequences because a lot of times I'll be downtown early in the morning and all the parking places are gone at 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning before most of the businesses have opened. Most of the parking places are gone because they didn't think about employees taking up those parking places all day and residents, because you have about 1,000 residents downtown that are now using the parking down there for all day. And that is an example of the city council not going out and having public discussions about what is getting information from lots of different folks about how to implement it.
I think there's a history in Salem City Council of when they feel like they're addressing something, especially relating to parking. Parking is a great example of this. The parking downtown. They probably set up a meeting, and it was probably posted on their agenda in a way that you had to be paying attention to the agenda to understand what was going to be there, and then expected the public to just be following that all the time and to hear what's going on and have that concern and come down and talk about it. And additionally, they probably felt like they followed the traditional steps to get that information out there and get the feedback that they wanted. But we need to really be rethinking how we reach out to people. We should be, when we were talking about parking, we should have invited members of business owners and building owners down in downtown Salem and ask them to please come and share their thoughts on the parking situation, because they're the ones that know more than I think most of the city council that probably doesn't live downtown. I think the mayor may live downtown, but most of city council doesn't live downtown. And so they're not, they don't have all the information to fully understand that. They're seeing that maybe from the consumer, that goes and finds parking to be annoying and gets frustrated because they can't use the downtown area. But there was a relevant conversation there from the business owners, and most of them, if I understand correctly, had actually, come up with a plan and a proposal that they thought was being implemented and that they had agreed to. But the city had maybe misused some of those resources and funds in a certain area, and they didn't fully understand what the proposal was. I talked to a couple business owners down there that just kind of felt like, I thought I was paying for this already.
Yeah.
And why am I not? Why, there seems to have been a breakdown in communication. The businesses down there are prepared to roll up their sleeves and find a solution because that's very relevant to them. And I think the residents that live down there are probably in a similar situation. Let's find a solution that works. Whether it is metered at certain times or paid parking at certain times. I don't know what that is. I think because I don't own a business or live in downtown Salem, but I want to hear what those people have to say. I've met with a couple of people already that feel like they have been paying for free parking and they expect free parking, and so that's maybe where we should start the conversation and find out where was the breakdown in communication, or are we not providing a service we should be providing?
Well, and I would imagine a lot of those business owners feel like they're in competitions with, Lancaster Mall, places that they pay for parking so that people can come in and not have to pay a fee for parking there. And so they feel like they'd be at a disadvantage if you had to go down and pay for parking. And I know that some of the businesses on State Street between, say, like 12th and 17th are really impacted because they pay even higher fees. They're paying like a quarter for 10 minutes. And there's certain restaurants down there that are getting clobbered because you have to have, more than $1 worth of change just to eat a meal. And so it's really starting to impact some of those folks as well.
And I've been in that situation where I've driven downtown and thought to myself, oh, I really want to eat at that restaurant. And you look in the cup holder and there's no change, and you're just like, I guess I'm not eating at that restaurant. That's something that we need to address and figure out. We need to find out what the original agreements were, because I feel like those have been sort of, not understood fully or maybe lost in the process of trying to find a solution to this. So first we need to start with what we originally committed to, and then work with the business owners, the residents, and people that shop down there to find out what is the best solution for them. What are they willing to give? What are they not willing to give? And that's where we should start that conversation.
And one of the other kind of things that I've seen is like with the North Campus. There's kind of a vision, I think, of what they want to do with it, but then the neighborhood isn't being really included in that conversation.
The North Campus.
That's like the Salem Hospital off Center Street,
Yes.
where, state is not going to keep some of those buildings, and it's kind of like park-like now. So it's very, the community would like to kind of keep it that way, or at least limit. They don't want it paved over and just a bunch of apartments or something.
I can see the conversation as has been unfolding. You have business owners that are, and developers and people in the industrial side of Salem that that is a prime piece of real estate in the center of Salem that could be used for so many wonderful purposes. And I imagine if I lived there, I would love a park. I would love that turned into it. And there's a couple buildings there that have really historical significance.
Right.
And I know some people have said, hey, Thompson should go in there and open up a facility in there and renovate that and use that for a great restaurant in the neighborhood with beautiful parkland for the neighbors. And we should start. I mean, that's a conversation that we should have. I understand the city may have tried to sell it originally, but they couldn't find someone to buy it, or the state may have tried to sell it, and so it's kind of defaulting to the city, and we're having to find a solution to this. We should find a good, healthy mixture. But again, we need to bring in the community members, the neighborhood association, the people that live at the edge of that park, find out what their concerns are, what they would like to see happen there, and then legitimately bring in the people that do want to see some sort of development on there and hear what they have to say. We need to find a good mixture. I would like to keep it as original as possible, just because I think there are some historic buildings there that have tremendous significance for the history of Salem that we should be making sure are preserved to the best of the ability, but also the land. That is a perfect place for a park.
Yes.
It really is. And the neighbors have enjoyed having access to that. And that's a draw and a value to that community that can't be undernoted or disregarded. That is a real treasure to those people that live there.
Yeah, and one of the things I always found in the work environment anyway, is that you need to consult as many people as possible, because then they feel like they're part of the process, that at least their concerns were heard and addressed. And if you don't get that, then you do get resistance. And that's kind of what we saw with the downtown parking situation, is make sure that you give people a feeling of being connected to the solution.
Well, and like I can provide something to the conversation because I drive through there, but I don't necessarily think it's the same as the people that actually live in that
Right.
neighborhood, or businesses that are trying to develop and grow in Salem, or the environmental aspect of that, which I care deeply about, and that is something I do want to have a say in. But we need to be bringing the key decision makers, the key and invested communities that are there, and find out what they have to say and really take them seriously. I think the homeowners who actually live there currently now and sort of have a first most important voice that needs to be heard, sort of relevant aspect that we need to consider. But those are the best people to start that conversation and bring something to the council, to bring to the table, to sit down and to allow us to hear and understand. That's where we should be starting first. That's something that I think could be done better in Salem.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to see done better in Salem is public transportation,
Oh.
especially on the weekends. To me, it is really not acceptable that city of Salem doesn't have public transportation 7 days a week so that people can get to jobs, get downtown, get wherever they need to go without a car.
I think another candidate that's running for another position has often referenced that Salem is one of the only cities of its size and its regional sort of impact that doesn't have weekend bus service available, and that's something that we should really address and look at. I think there's a funding structure problem with chariots that probably needs to come to the conversation first, and we need to find a solution we can all agree on. I'm not saying that there is a perfect scenario already in place, but I think that the community is willing to accept certain responsibility for that, and that the businesses and people that rely on weekend transportation are willing to accept a certain part of that. But also we should address certain, this is an environmental issue as well. This is something where less cars on the road impacts traffic. Like you said with the bridge, if there could be a shuttle service, well, that's relevant on weekends too.
Yeah.
So we need to evaluate that, starting with how we are funding and taking care of and addressing chariots, and then move forward with how can we fix these problems.
Yeah, and I guess one of my viewpoints comes from the fact that I usually worked off shifts, and there's no way to get to work a lot of times if you're working an off shift, or get home, one or the other. Sometimes you can get to work, but then you can't get home, or vice versa. And
when I got out of high school, I worked at Office Depot in Lancaster, and I lived in West Salem, and the bus didn't run that late when I got off work, so
Yes.
I could get to work, but I couldn't get home, and it's kind of a walk if you don't make it. That's something, and for especially my generation, or even people that are just, not as economically stable as everyone else who has cars and a reliable form of transportation, or maybe people that choose to ride their bike or choose to take public transportation. It's just a personal choice. They suddenly don't have an option after a certain time or on weekends, that they can't get around, they can't get to what they need, and they can't get to their jobs.
Yeah, and see, like, I live in downtown Salem, and I was working in an industrial area off McGilchrist, and there's no bus service out there after about 7, or at least there used to be till 7, but now it's even earlier than that when they stop running. And like biking down there is not easy because there's a lot of areas with no, you have to basically bike in the lane. There's no area off to the side for you to bike on. It's not well lit, and it's very dangerous. And even walking out there is dangerous. And so that's one of the reasons why, I get kind of annoyed with the public transportation issue, because I couldn't even take some of the alternative ways to get back and forth to work without threatening my safety, which is another issue that I see in Salem, is the fact that there's not a lot of emphasis given to bicyclists, pedestrians, skateboarders, as far as safety is concerned, especially in the downtown area and on city streets. It just, to me, it's scary. And I live near the corner of Chemeketa and 17th, and one of a resident that's visually impaired was hit a little over a year ago. And then the city came out and did some pedestrian enforcement, of cars not stopping properly, but we haven't seen them since. And that is an issue. Plus, I see a lot of times where the police don't enforce the laws against people using their cell phones while they're driving, which is a very big, serious safety issue as far as I'm concerned. So do you have any thoughts on?
I think the city has a very interesting history of this. I'm just remembering several years ago when they were retrofitting Waterfront Park there, and when you came off the bridge coming from West Salem and took a little off-ramp, they installed a traffic light. And then for probably 6 months, you could sit there and just watch everyone blow that traffic light, because they didn't see it, because nobody told it. It just popped up one day, and it took a long time for us to get used to the fact that that was there. When the bike share things came in, everyone was, what is this little bicycle drawn in the middle of the road? There were no signs, there was no explanation, there was no outreach to the public. No one was told what that was and had no clue what was going on. And you had the bicyclist community that was, very proud of their new right of way on the road, and then the motorists that were appalled that there were bicycles on their road and no one had a clear understanding of what was going on there. We can do a better job of outreach and involvement in the public in this process. And I think Salem's moving in the right direction. There's a lot more that can be done and should be done. And I'm not going to say like we should be more like Portland, because we're not anything like Portland. But they do have dedicated lanes, which makes it safer, and dedicated sort of mediums and such for for bikes specifically. I went to Portland State University right when they installed that bicycle lane. And they didn't do a very good job of explaining what it was. The amount of cars that would pull into the bicycle lane and park was hysterical. And then there was this random little lane that nobody knew what it was. But, to be fair, it's a problem every city has. But they found, they tried something, saw if it worked, and we should do the same. We should be open to different options, see what's going on, involve the public, and find a solution that everyone can agree on.
Now, we've discussed most of the issues that I wanted to bring up. Are there any that you would like to see? We only have like a minute or so left, but are there some that you would really like to talk about?
I just wanted to highlight, too, the historical significance of my race. There's a lot of diversity on the council. I think, several gender diversity elements are kind of going to be missing moving forward into the new council, because there is only one woman running for office. But we have the opportunity, myself being an openly LGBT candidate, and to my knowledge, Salem has never had an LGBT candidate. And I think that city council should be a representation of the population. And there is a population of LGBT, of people of color, of women, a large population of women. But that should be reflected in the council. And I really think that we should celebrate that. I think that we should encourage that involvement. I'm a strong believer that anyone can run for office. Everyone has the opportunity to, everyone has the chance to, as long as you meet the requirements of living there, and that it should be a reflection of the people and the community in which it, is being governed.
Well, that is democracy.
Yes. And historically, I received the Victory Fund endorsement, which is the National Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund. They've never endorsed us in a local city council race here in Salem, but I also received Basic Rights Oregon endorsement. They don't traditionally do endorsements in local races. They do what's called a green light or a red light to sort of highlight your stance, but they've done it 3 times in the last 10 years. They came out with an official endorsement of a local candidate, which was me yesterday.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christopher,
Thank you.
for coming down. And this has been the Valley View, and we'll be back with another special edition with another candidate for City Council here in Salem. Thank you.
Thank you.